I felt more culture shock living in Ireland than I did when I lived in Ecuador.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you'll hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Well, if you are enjoying That's What I Call Marketing, and of course I hope you are, I would love if you could leave a review or a comment. It really does help us reach an engaged community of marketers just like you. And all those little bits help because the algorithms don't do it for us organically anymore. On to today's episode, and it is a wonderful episode. And I start the episode by saying it's a topic I really love. It is about global marketing, and I'm joined by Katherine, Melchior and Nataly Kelly, who are both global CMOs, and they've written an amazing book called Brand Global, Adapt Local. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So if you are a brand that is in the global marketing space or thinking about going global, who doesn't have those big ambitions, this is the episode just for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Tracksuit, and what a great episode for us to be partnering with Tracksuit on. It is, of course, the always on affordable brand tracking dashboard, and Tracksuit now covers 25 countries across the Americas, Europe and Asia Pacific, providing marketers with one consistent view of brand health across multiple markets. It's amazing that you can have this affordable brand tracking dashboard always on across over 25 markets. So if you are a global brand or have ambitions to be a global brand, do talk to Tracksuit. Visit gotracksuit.com and they will be able to help you out, show you a demo of their amazing platform. They're always adding new features and functionality to us, keeping us marketers really up to date with what is going on with our brands. So get in touch with gotracksuit.com, and thanks to Tracksuit for their support of this episode all about global marketing. Let's get straight into it with Katherine and Nataly. Katherine, Nataly, thank you so much for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. And we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics and the challenge that lots of brands face with going global but remaining relevant locally. So we've so much to talk about in this space. You've written an incredible book about it. But first of all, maybe a bit of the background. I mean, Katherine, I'll go to you first. I mean, let's not do this in Japanese, if that's okay.
If you insist.
You've had amazing experience in global markets that obviously has given you the experience to write this book. Tell me a bit about the background.
Sure, I'm happy to. First of all, thank you so much for having us. It's really great to be here. I've spent 2 decades working for Louis Vuitton in Japan, Nike in the US, Nordstrom in France. And so I've kind of just been on a circuit of international brands and business in 5 different industries. So I mentioned all luxury and sportswear and fashion, but I was CMO in Tokyo and in tech at Apple in Berlin. And I ran luxury hospitality for Hyatt in Chicago. So I've worked for lots of really great brands in many different industries. And now I teach at Berkeley Haas Business School. And it was a combination of my students and people asking me to write a book. And when you've crossed so many different sectors and cultures, the question is, what would you write about?
Yeah.
How do you find the red thread that crosses through those? And I felt that the most challenging and yet most rewarding aspect is building a brand that can at the same time be consistent globally, because that's what a brand has to be. It has to be about its universal, timeless values. But the fact is, cultures are different and they're more culturally distinct than ever. And so they want you to bring those values to life uniquely in each market. So that's why I wrote this book, if I may, Brand Global, Adapt Local, because I really do think that it's embracing that tension and how to do it. And it's both about the headquarters and the regional teams to understand each other and respect each other and know the brand to be able to understand their audience and create value for them.
Yeah. And Nataly, you've had lots of experience as well in dealing with how does a global brand get local and remain relevant as well. Tell everyone a bit about your background.
Yes, I'll try to connect the thread here. So why I'm involved in this book. My background is in primarily localization in the tech space. B2B tech is where I've worked for all of my career in marketing. Before I worked in marketing, I worked in the language industry. So I was a Spanish interpreter in my very first job and a translator. And that's kind of how I got into helping businesses go global when I was in a market research firm and did that. And now I'm the CMO at Zappy, which has a consumer insights platform. And we also help a lot of these large global brands go global and understand local consumer insights around the world. Katherine and I met because of a Harvard Business Review article that I wrote that she was using as a course material
Hey.
for her students. And I had formerly heard of her back when I was a VP of marketing for the first time at a tech company, another B2B SaaS company based out of New York. And I saw this Wall Street Journal article and it said this Hyatt executive carries a ball gown in her carry-on or something like that. And I was like,
I want to do
that is, yeah, I want to be her. Who is she? How can I like have a career like that? And at the time, I just saw, oh, I'll never meet that person. And then all these years later, she was teaching and like our paths crossed on LinkedIn. And so we actually worked on the book for better part of a year before we even met in person once. And the book was done by the time we first met in person. But yeah, so it's an interesting story. Even the nature of the book was highly global
Yeah,
and local.
yeah.
So yeah, so a really cool way to meet someone. It just shows the power of building a global brand yourself, even a personal brand.
Yeah. And again, we give out a lot about social media and all that kind of stuff, but wonderful things come from it. Like I've become really friendly with Mark and V from the Sleeping Barber podcast because we just connected over a shared love of what we're doing and met for the first time this year in Cannes in person. And it was just like,
That's right. And we were meant to meet with you in Cannes. I forgot. We were hoping to meet you there. Are you going next year?
yeah, it's the hardest place to try and meet anybody, isn't it? Like it's
Yeah,
just,
it is. Catherine's a veteran of Cannes.
I live in Nice half the year, so I can just take the train every day over to Cannes.
So, and I started by saying, like, the book is about a topic that I really do love because I worked in a brand that had, and I worked in global markets, and I could see the tensions and the frustrations on both sides of an organization where there's a centralized, let's say, a global brand team or content team, and then there's local markets that are like, but we want to do this thing and that thing and the other thing. And it's anyone I've spoken to in global roles, and the company I'm in now, we've just made that step to becoming global brand. We've rebranded a number of markets as Intact Insurance, and we're starting the journey, right? And actually, it's brilliant to be part of starting the journey because we can all read the book and we can figure out as we build it what's the right way of building it. But it is, it's always had to be like just the perennial challenge of global brands that because they all start somewhere. They don't start global necessarily. So it's such a huge challenge. Taking it on then as a topic for a book is a lot, right? Because where did you start? Like, what was your kind of?
I was going to say, where do you start?
Yeah.
Right. That is the question. Yeah. I think it was those of us who do the work know how hard and and also how rewarding it is. And I think it's that reward that I try to teach my students. I work in the middle of Silicon Valley and I get these students who come in and they think marketing is advertising and promotion. And by the middle of the class, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea how strategic it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that in writing the book, where do you start? So I like to go back to what is marketing anyway? And I actually asked the students, like, tell me the earliest forms of marketing. What do you think it was? And the book talks about it. So we go back to the Silk Road and we talk about spices and tea.
Yeah.
And so I try to put people back in that era and that time. And what do you think? I mean, it must have been competitive and you had to carry your tea from one place to another, but you're in this area and this marketplace where everyone's selling tea. How did they do it? So it's when you start to put people in those real circumstances and challenge them to think, how would you compete on your tea versus someone else's tea in terms of color and flavor and naming and packaging, where people start to think about all the different aspects that we have at our disposal. And so I started there. So I do start with the book and some foundational concepts, right? What is marketing? What is branding? What is culture? So that's where it starts to get very murky.
Yeah.
What is culture?
Yeah.
And then you put it all together, right? You have to know your brand. You have to understand. We talk a lot about cultural intelligence. So that's basically how the structure of communication, understanding your consumer, and how brands in different sectors struggled or succeeded, and what are some of the very practical frameworks that they have used to succeed. I think that's where the book is very helpful as I talk to lots of different audiences, is these frameworks that give you some kind of a compass in the vast jungle of foreign markets.
Yeah, yeah. That cultural piece, just to touch on that, is important to kind of tap into what I think. What are the things that are unique to that culture? Because again, there are lots of things that are similar. I did a lot of work before where we were able to find universal insights, but then there are bits. There's the little bits. That's such an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's really where the localization aspects tie in because localization teams deal with this all the time. And I led localization at HubSpot for many years. I started as a VP of marketing, but also ran localization. And then as we evolved, I ended up leading international expansion, opening up our offices in Japan, Germany, France, Colombia. And what I learned along the way is very much aligned with what Katherine talked about. We have this iceberg framework in the book where we talk about what's visible and what's not visible. And most of culture is not
Yeah.
explicit, which is why AI struggles with it because AI would have to be trained on it. And for to be trained on it, you have to document it. But you can't document something that's living and breathing and evolving all the time because it's always going to be lagging. The training is never going to keep up with, oh, guess what was in the news today? And now it's a meme and now it's all over social media. Now, like we can't train an AI tool as fast
Yeah.
as these things unfold in real life. It's really hard to convey the nuance. And I think one thing we talk about in the book is our lived experiences. Like Catherine's lived in many countries. I lived in Ecuador. I lived in Ireland. And people always are like, oh, well, Ireland is so similar to the US. And like I visited Ireland for 15 years before I lived there and had my family there and going to school there and learning Irish there and being part of the culture. Everything's different.
Yeah.
Everything is different. I felt more culture shock living in Ireland than I did when I lived in Ecuador.
Wow.
We tend to underestimate the differences. We tend to think you can have a cookie cutter approach. And that's where so many of these companies make mistakes, especially I think for digital go to market, because it seems easy. Oh, just localize the content, localize the website, localize the payment page, and you're done. Nope. You have to build a brand one country at a time, one market at a time, one culture at a time. And that's why I think this book is so powerful because the lessons, as Katherine talked about, are applicable to everyone doing marketing and really to every person in business who needs to think about building a global brand.
Well, that kind of the differences. Again, I think to your point about the English speaking markets often get bucketed together. Is I remember doing work in Australia and just some of our colleagues in the US, we were like, no, it's very different. And they're like, kind of sounds the same. Don't understand some of what they say, and we would have spent a lot of time then just building up examples of things that were culturally interesting or had kind of cut through in culture in Australia. I remember there's a rugby player he's well retired now, but called the Honey Badger, and he used to do these hilarious interviews, like just proper Aussie bloke interviews. And I remember I sent that to one of our global brand VPs and go, Carmen, watch this. This is what we're talking about. Oh, and it's just that, first of all, there's the openness that she had of going, okay, I'm interested in seeing this. But then there was I kind of see the differences now. Like it's a always on thing, isn't it?
Yes, I'll give you, and Katherine, this is a recommendation for you. So my shortcut for Irish culture is Father Ted.
Yes.
There's a sitcom that is very famous in Ireland and other parts of the world too, but mostly in Ireland, that pretty much explains a lot of Irish culture in the form of a comedy. And if you want somebody, it's the first thing my husband who's Irish had me watch. And it really gave me context.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those cultural shortcuts. There's nothing like that knowledge and that learning, like being there firsthand in the market.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of building that cultural affinity and overlap and knowledge and ability to integrate and understand your local customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
My father-in-law is 96 years old, and he has been reading it diligently. And every time I talk to him, he's showing me where he is in the book. And he just called me yesterday to say he'd finished it.
Wow.
And he's 96 years old, but he's not a global marketer. And I said, wow, that's so sweet of you to read it. And he said, where did you get all those stories? To Natalie's point.
Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting. And as a marketer, I'm interested in people. So I wrote the book through these insights of people.
Yeah. And you touched on there kind of the mistakes that a lot of brands make. And like they wouldn't have there's no book without them in the sense of if this was easy, the book wouldn't be needed, but it is needed. But those mistakes are, and they're not intentional, I don't think, but like that kind of, well, we can just take what we have and plop it. And there's just lots of evidence that doesn't work. But let's say someone's listening to this now and we're about to make these big steps into global brand territory. Are there things kind of organizationally that they should do first before they go and put the asset in the market?
I would say before you think about the organization, I would do a attitude check. Yeah, organization's incredibly important, but there are lots of different varieties. Figuring out really why you're going and are you open to change from a brand perspective and from a operational perspective. Are you open to change? What do you hold sacrosanct about your brand? And what are you willing to be flexible on? Because you will require flexibility. I mean, I've worked for Nike and I've worked for Louis Vuitton. And I can tell you, those are two brands that don't really like flexibility. It is your way or the highway. But they have learned. And I can tell you, because I was at Nike running women's footwear in the day when it was, and I kid you not, shrink it and paint it.
Okay.
Is what they did from men's shoes to women's shoes.
Wow.
And so I talk about insights there for women, even in your own country, right? How women have different needs and aspirations and how to put that into your products.
Yeah.
So that's where I think before you talk about organization, it's really about your attitude, and doing some of that reflection, I think will help you in the long run.
If you want to find out more about Tracksuit, go to gotracksuit.com and find out how they can be your affordable, always on brand tracking dashboard.
Yeah, I would add to that. One of the things that I found at HubSpot was we had a lot of local bias, proximity bias to our own market that we were simply unaware of as a US-based tech company, which US-based companies are particularly guilty of this. And the reason why is very simple. It's a big economy. You can grow to a certain size without having to look outside your own borders.
Yeah.
Same thing in Japan, frankly. Japanese companies tend to struggle with this too. Brazil as well. Like any big market, big economy that is kind of able, you can build a business there and you don't have to look outside, you're going to struggle with this. A couple of places in the world where they don't struggle as much. Ireland is one.
Yeah.
Same thing in the Nordics. Most of them think, oh, I'm going to have to be able to accept different currencies and different cultures from Sweden to Finland to Norway. And probably I'm going to need to sell to the US, but we do speak English, but we have to accommodate all our local languages as well. As you go global, you start to wake up and realize, oh, this was designed for the US market from the start. So the more countries you add, the more cognizant you have to be about that original inherent bias that's built in.
Yes.
And some of it you can leverage. Katherine has this great framework in the book, Freedom Within a Frame, where she talks about you want to have consistency around certain things, your brand values. You need to define like what are the things that stay the same. But within that framework, can you play? I had this meme at HubSpot called Global First. I was like, we have to think global first. And what I realized is people misunderstood even that. And they'd be like, it's global first because we told all the local markets what to do. I'm like, great that you talk to them, but that's not the same thing as thinking and involving from the strategy perspective up front. So I started to pivot it to multi-market from the start.
Right.
Because it had to be thinking about more than just your own original culture. It's thinking in a way that's scalable to more markets. Because if you build in that globalization debt early, it cascades just like tech debt. And then it's hard to undo later on.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, and I think and you talk about it there in the framework, what do you keep core? Are there certain things you like that are like, these are non-negotiable, probably different for everybody, but do you see some that you kind of think these are non-negotiable to keep core?
So it does depend, but one thing is obviously your logo. You want your logo to be consistent. Now, that being said, we use KitKat as an example, and KitKat is a wonderful example of brand global, adapt local, because a lot of people know it in different markets and they know it both differently and consistently. Everyone knows the red KitKat logo.
Yep.
But we use an example from Malaysia where they created a Borneo sourced chocolate bar for the local market.
Right.
It actually came out of hardship because they had supply chain troubles. And the Nestle team in Malaysia realized that Malaysia actually has one of the largest rainforests in the world. So they actually worked with local farmers to shift their crops from palm oil to cocoa. And that not only gave them local supply that was inherently dark chocolate, which responded to the local taste preference, but also helped grow the profit for local farmers. So it made them heroes. And that responded to Kit Kat's global strategy of freedom within framework. So their framework is the red Kit Kat logo. When we think of Kit Kat, everyone thinks of those fingers that you can break. And so that's all the same kind of shape. And then it's a chocolate wafer mix, no matter what the flavors are, whether it's this dark Borneo chocolate or whether it's matcha in Japan or tiramisu in Italy, it's always chocolate and wafer.
That's such a great example, isn't it, of the situation, but also like the core being strong, right, and being something you stick to.
Yeah. I just, as you were talking about Kit Kat, and whenever, forgive me, Connor, but when I hear an Irish accent, I think of Irish things.
Yeah.
The Kerry Gold butter. Kerry Gold's very popular in Ireland. And I experienced it first in Ireland before it was available in the US widely. So we used to bring it back with us from Ireland a long time ago. Many Irish people did, coming back to America. But then they started to sell it in the US. And it was at first exactly the same shape, same size, same taste. Everything to me seemed the same. I think it was imported from Ireland. And maybe I don't know how it's getting here. But then I noticed in like Costco and other like these where you buy bulk purchases, they started to sell a package that was like twice the size for American households, American fridges, American appetites. Very different from what they sold in Ireland and the UK. So then I noticed recently that their product portfolio is adapting to the local baking culture in the US because we do a lot of baking, and especially in the Midwest. Now they sell the bars in the shape that we are used to buying them. Originally, they would only sell a certain shape that wasn't the US size, and people were confused. And they've now evolved it to the shapes that people are used to and it's the same taste, and it's the same brand, and it's the same gold packaging.
I'd heard some of that stuff, actually, the story about how they were kind of adapting the product. But again, as you're saying, like they're going to keep consistent with the gold wrapper. I was going to ask, you touched there on kind of the B2B piece as well. Is it harder for B2B?
Yeah, I mean, Catherine's been a CMO of a tech company. A lot of things are the same. Building a brand is the same, really, whether it's a B2C or a B2B brand, but then how you go to market is where things may be a little bit different. We have some examples in there of brands that did it well. We profile Adobe, for example, where we talk about the complexity of how many markets, how many countries, it's like French Canadian, French for Switzerland, French for Belgium, French for France. And like, how do you do that when you're serving all these different customers all over the world? And it's B2B and B2C customers. And then you get really complex.
Yeah, I think that B2B, you have many more constituents, but you then also have more options. So I think B2C, you're exposed from day one.
Yes.
So you're only new once in a market, and whatever you are doing to one person, you're doing to everybody in many ways.
I think the hard part is most CFOs, they want to see the impact of brand on demand, and they want a through line to say, this much brand awareness investment gets us to this many dollars. Now, the way I view it is from the classic growth funnel is it's not about that. It's about the conversion metrics at every stage. So if you look at brand awareness, people are like, oh, that's a top of funnel. That'll grow audience by X amount. Yes, but that's very hard to measure, as we know. But what you can measure is I did these plays and it impacted this conversion metric on this stage. Because some brand plays are designed to hit bottom of funnel stages, some are middle of funnel, some are top of funnel. And I think brand has been viewed as like only top of funnel. It's not. It's actually everywhere. It helps. There are brand plays that really are just for your customers that you can do just to hit your customers, but they're brand advertising, brand marketing, brand campaigns. But that's not how most B2B tech marketers have ever thought of it.
Yeah.
And so it's changing our mindset in applying some of this to our space, but most B2B tech marketers are not there yet. Like I'm seeing it happen, but it's
Yeah.
still, we're learning from each other, these two sides. And that's one of the great things I loved about working with Katherine on this book. I learned a ton from her, about the world that, she comes from and knows deeply. I learned a ton along the way.
I would say the other thing about this is that brand does contribute. It lowers your conversion rate, right? Or it increases your conversion rate. It lowers the cost of
Yeah.
conversion.
Yeah.
But we don't have that number, and that number changes by market
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
by increase in awareness. Where are you starting, and where are you getting to, and what is your natural conversion, and what is your price? So all of those are variables, and I struggled with that at Babbel to try to get more money for my brand awareness campaigns because they wanted that specific number, but you can't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you did, then it would be pure science. But the beauty and the challenge, and once again, of Varieties is both art and science.
Yeah, no, 100%. Actually, I use Tracksuit, which is a brand tracking dashboard. And what's great about it is that it's B2C, but it is multi-market as well. So it means if you're a global marketer, you're able to see it, and you're able to, exactly what you're talking about, you'll be able to see the impact down like through the funnel, right? So the conversions and all. It's such a powerful tool, really amazing.
It is. Brand tracking software. I'm so happy to see more companies doing this and making it more accessible. What I love about it is I can see now exactly where I am in relation to other companies that sell
Yeah.
consumer insight software. And I can see where things are moving based on how often I repeat it. And I love that because I can run specific plays and I'll be able to show my CEO, my CFO, my investors the movement and the traction. As Katherine said, it's by market, it's by segment, but I can pick what I care about and then say, hey, I did these plays and here's how the needle moved. Can we get investment to do more next year? So that's the thing, is we're getting used to this as marketers who might not have had access to those tools before.
But one of the things, obviously, and it's in every conversation everyone has, you probably know what I'm going to say next, AI, and how that might help brands in going global. But we've touched on it at the start, really. It might make certain things easier to do, but it won't do other things. Like the cultural piece, it won't do. How are you seeing that play out? And it's not even the next year prediction. I was talking to Mark Ritz, and he was like, we got to think about the 30s now for this stuff. Where is that going to go? But what's your perspective on the good and the bad, maybe, of using AI for going global?
What we did exactly talk about this. We spoke to professors who specialize in AI and to confirm our thinking, which is exactly this, that AI is fantastic at a lot of medial skills, at linear skills. It rearranges existing information and existing knowledge, and it can do it really fast. So it can take away a lot of menial tasks, but culture is context. And we all know, however you ask AI, whatever you frame it, makes all the difference in what it can give you. And it just doesn't get culture because that is context. So it doesn't see it. If you ask it specifically, so for this KitKat example, just to make it really concrete, if you said, oh, what can I do in Malaysia to change my supply chain and also create a healthier chocolate that responds to my freedom in a frame for that market, would it think, oh, let me go to the farmers locally? I don't think so. It can't get that far. So that's where it takes human intelligence married with artificial intelligence to be able to get that triple win.
Yeah.
What I'm finding in my work at Zappy is our customers, who are mostly large global brands, are still struggling to connect their data sources, even in one market,
Yeah.
let alone in 100 that they're in. Like they can't even get like the business units in the same country to share their data with each other, let alone all the other markets. A lot of our AI tools are still text-based interface. You can speak, yes, but voice recognition technology is not that great. It's not that good with an Irish accent, Connor. It's not that great in other languages because when I speak Spanish, it doesn't always understand me. So I think there's a long way to go to where we will be able to leverage AI to the degree that human communication can be absorbed, understood, synthesized, processed, leveraged as fast as humans can do.
Yeah.
That's just not close to where we are.
I think the AIization of the world will be bland and vanilla, and that's a real risk for brands. I think particularly as you want to, if you're a brand that has big global ambitions, you can't be bland and vanilla. When you're going to have to be able to act in a big brand way, but have those local nuances. It's such an important point. My last question for both of you is: has there been like an anecdote or story that you really enjoyed or surprised you researching the book?
I was just traveling and someone asked me to sign the book and say fly naked because you're like, what? Why would they say fly naked? It's an example of a book from Braniff Airlines that was going into Spanish market and the Spanish market, and they completely misjudged the translation, and it ended up being it was about new leather seats and a new premium experience going into Latin Spanish speaking markets, but the translation was completely wrong, and so it ended up being flying naked, which was not exactly the sexy view that people wanted. So I think that one's really fun and funny and tells you about the risk
Yeah.
in being.
I love that one too. I feel like it manifests every day. And even in the journey we've had of promoting the book,
Mm.
I've seen things. I was just in California a couple of weeks ago for a book event and signing, and it was sponsored by a German tech company, DeepL, and they had copies of the book there. And in prepping for this, they had asked me, do you have a certain type of pen that you like to sign with? And as Catherine mentioned, I've written 4 books. I've done a lot of book signings. I've never once been asked what type of pen. And I said, wow, you guys are like,
Yeah.
and that's next level. And then I realized, yeah, Germans do care about pens more than Americans typically do. When I was in college, I noticed the 2 German exchange students had these leather pencil cases that they carried around. And I had to ask them, like, why do you both have the same pencil case? And the German student said to me, when a baby is born in Germany, they say, here is your baby and here is your pencil case. It's a different culture. And I'm not an expert. I've never lived there. I launched an office there for HubSpot, but I'm not an expert in German culture. But it just struck me like I learned something new with every interaction. And that is why marketing has such scope of impact, to have impact on those small interactions, those little things, those little details that are
Yeah.
so nuanced.
Yeah. Because it is those, it can be down to the smallest little thing. And that's the bit. And I've seen it before where people have put local teams in place and then ignore the things they say. And it's just such a mistake. Don't do it, or do it and listen. And but listen, what a brilliant book. Congratulations on it. As I said, I love this topic. I think it's just so fascinating because it's culture, it's people, anyone listening, Catherine is showing the book. But I'll put a link into the show notes so people can go and order. So congratulations. Thank you so much for spending time each day. I really appreciate it. I'm so looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. It was a wonderful conversation, and we appreciate your interest and your support.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, what a great episode with Katherine and Nataly. I mean, you have such a wealth of experience and expertise from both of them. Incredible roles in incredible brands all across the world. And I just think it's really fascinating to hear their approach. And look, they've learned from it, doing it and making mistakes. So helps us. The book is full of frameworks. You heard about some of those we talked about in today's episode. I think anyone in global role is going to really, really enjoy reading this book. A lot of head nodding. And if you're not currently in a global role, I think this will give you a sense of some of the things you need to think about when that time comes, because you just never know when that will happen, as has happened to me in my recent role as well. So it's really exciting to be part of a global brand. Well, thanks so much to Tracksuit for their support of today's episode. I said at the start of the show, if you are a global brand and you need someone to help track your brand in over 25 markets, well, go to gotracksuit.com. They'll be able to help you out, and at a fraction of the cost of some of the other suppliers out there. Tracksuit is affordable, Tracksuit is always on, and Tracksuit is available in over 25 markets with a wonderful team supporting you. And we do monthly reviews with the team at Tracksuit. They're constantly showing us new features that are in the platform. Great information for us to share with the business, and has really helped actually with our planning for next year as well. So visit gotracksuit.com. That is it for today's episode. Of course, if you are enjoying That's What I Call Marketing, you can rate, review, leave a comment, share with one other person. It really does help us continue to grow this amazing marketing community. Over 42,000 people tune in to That's What I Call Marketing every single week. So why not join them? Well, you already have if you're listening to this bit. Okay, listen, that's it for me. We'll be back with another episode next week. Take care.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.